In the final part of our trilogy, we take a look at some common mistakes made with should and may statements. A quick reminder for those that need it. Shall denotes a requirement. Should denotes a recommendation, i.e. a suggestion or proposal, and may is used to denote an acceptable alternative. We'll start in reverse order by looking at common errors made with the term may. Here's an example of one of the more common errors we come across. Now please note, this is a completely made-up statement. Carbon steel may only be used in non-marine environments. What is wrong here? Well, it reminds me of Henry Ford's famous quote concerning the Ford Model T. Any customer can have a car painted any color that he wants so long as it is black. Now, this is not really much of a choice. In fact, there is no choice. The only option is black. In the same way, may only is not providing an acceptable alternative. It is a hard constraint on the use of carbon steel and therefore a requirement that needs to be captured with a shall statement. So, watch out for any may only or may not and other mays with restrictions. In nearly all these cases, you're looking at hidden requirements. Another thing to watch out for with may, and actually something that also applies to shall and should, once we've committed to use a specific term like may to formally denote the presence of an acceptable alternative, to avoid any confusion, we need to avoid using that specific term for any other purpose. Let's go back to an example from part 2. The pilot burners may use fuel gas from the site. As we just covered, may denotes an acceptable alternative. So we want to avoid saying something like this. What is wrong with this rationale? Well, there are two things wrong. It starts off well enough, providing the reasoning for the statement, but then it includes a potential hidden requirement to confirm the reliability of the supply. And did anyone spot the second may that appears in the rationale? The reliability may need to be confirmed. Now, to avoid confusion and avoid anyone incorrectly interpreting this statement as an option, we must fix this rationale. Now, I'm going to use my engineering judgment with this rationale and expect that we will only allow fuel gas to be used because we have a reliable source of excess gas. If we didn't, then the requirement needs to be more conditional. We are making a decisive rationale instead of a maybe, might be. We understand that this might seem a bit pedantic, but remember, we are going for clarity and precision in our specs and standards. And that means using defined terms exclusively for the purpose for which they have been defined and avoiding all other use of those terms. Here's a chance for you to have a go now. Which of these statements uses may correctly as an acceptable alternative? Note down the numbers of the statements where may has been used correctly. You might want to pause the video here to give yourself a bit more time to go through the statements. Once you've noted down the numbers, unpause the video to answer the quiz question. Let's take a look at each statement. The first one is a common mistake. On the face of it, we have a good requirement, clearly stating what the contractor needs to do. However, in the second part of the trilogy, we established that the word may is used exclusively for acceptable alternatives. So we need to change the statement to something like how upstream pressure could or how upstream pressure might be affected by the selected scenario. On the face of it, the second statement is providing optionality. Credit may be taken. However, the phrase, provided that all of the following apply, dramatically changes this to a statement with hard constraints. In other words, this is an example of a hidden requirement. This statement can be rephrased more clearly as a conditional shall requirement. If credit is taken for a hard mechanical stop, all of the following constraints shall apply. Statement 3 is a good example of an acceptable option where may has been used correctly. Statement 4, on the other hand, is another hidden requirement. Similar to may only, may not is often used where the word shall is actually needed. Now on to should. As with may statements, the same red flags need to be raised if you find yourself writing should not or should only. You need to be sure that these are not hidden requirements. If they are indeed just recommendations, then it is okay to use should only and should not. But remember, these are just proposals and suggestions, and you want to limit how many should statements you are using. A common mistake with should statements is when folks cannot decide what is actually needed, and they think they're doing the world a favor by compromising and making the statement a recommendation.
So, Peter, based on my vast experience, the requirement must be a minimum distance of 10 meters shall separate System X from System Y. Well, I'm Judd. You know I have a deep respect for your experience, but I think we must have 20 meters separating these two systems. My train leaves in 15 minutes, and I need to go home and feed the cat. Shall we just compromise and say the minimum distance should be 15 meters? Yeah, let's just do that. All right.
You see a lot of this in industry standards, and this is only creating problems for projects down the line. Rather, we must be brave and exercise sound engineering judgment to close out these discussions and capture the relevant requirements. Similar to this flawed application of should statements, there are authors out there that artificially reduce the number of requirements in their document by simply changing shall statements to should statements. This is a terrible form of KPI management, and we must not fall into this trap. Another common error is the combination of if required and should, as shown here in this example. If required, pipes should be protected by removal of the contaminated soil. If something is required, well, then that's a requirement. We actually need a requirement such as contaminated soil shall not contact the pipes. If the requirement is dependent on some other condition or outcome, then we need to capture that. For example, if the pipes will remain in service for 5 years or more, contaminated soil shall not contact the pipes. And now, a chance for you to have a go. Try fixing the following statements, and feel free to use artistic license or sound engineering judgment when rephrasing these statements. Here are some possible solutions. These answers might seem too rigid to you. Are you asking yourself, what about the exceptions? It isn't always that simple. Which would you prefer? Vague statements that could lead to mistakes, or clear requirements that cover the majority of situations? Competent engineers can deviate if there are exceptional circumstances. To quickly recap, when using should and may, we have to watch out for hidden requirements. We also need to make sure we are not using should as a compromise or to simply reduce the number of shall statements. Doing so simply passes the tricky dilemmas onto project teams where time and the relevant experience could be lacking. Our aim has to be to simplify the lives of engineers on projects through clear and precise requirements. In the next module, we turn our attentions back to the requirement and the shall statement to see what we need to do in order to keep our requirements free from ambiguity.